3 seasons, 3 unforgettable seasons, Arsenal played some of the most exciting football in Europe. They led the Premier League for 248 days in the 2022-23 season. Broke points records, scored breathtaking goals, brought belief back to the Emirates. But how many trophies did they win? 0. It's the kind of pain that doesn't just sting, it haunts. What's wrong with Arsenal actually? They had the talent, they had the coach, they spent big, over £600 million in 3 years. On the surface, Arsenal's transfer business looks clever, even inspiring. Zinchenko and Gabriel Jesus, discarded by City, seemed like tactical masterstrokes. They slotted into Arteta's system with ease, bringing leadership and technical flair. Kai Havertz, once written off by Chelsea fans, has at times shown flashes of pure brilliance in red and white. But is it all as smart as it seems? They let go of Thomas Partey, a key defensive presence, only to bring in Christian Nørgaard, a solid player, but hardly a like-for-like replacement. They signed Raheem Sterling on loan the last season, and that transfer doesn't even look that bad compared to Kepa Arrizabalaga, a keeper known more for uncertainty than stability. So what's the plan here? How can a team with this much progress keep ending in heartbreak? And more importantly, how much longer can they afford to keep believing? Because once you see what's really going on with Arsenal, you'll never watch them the same way again. Chapter 1. From Precision to Confusion, Arsenal's Tactical Identity Crisis. Not long ago, Arsenal felt inevitable. They weren't just winning, they were convincing. Arteta's tactical system was humming, the squad was young, hungry, and fearless. A team that played with rhythm, intelligence, and belief. The Emirates had turned from a graveyard of past glory into a cauldron of noise and ambition. But fast forward to the present, and something feels off. They're still in the conversation, still in the top 4, still a Champions League side, but that sharp edge, that clarity of purpose, it's slipping. Tactically, emotionally, even spiritually, Arsenal seem to be caught in between. And that's not just about performances, it's about decisions. Take the transfer market. In the early stages of the rebuild, Arsenal were masterful. They brought in Gabriel Jesus and Alexander Zinchenko from Manchester City. Not superstars, but players who understood elite systems and fit perfectly into Arteta's vision. Both helped change the culture on and off the pitch. They weren't gambles, they were pieces of a puzzle. But recent moves, less convincing. Why bring in Raheem Sterling on loan, a player in clear decline, for just one unremarkable season? Why let Thomas Partey, once a midfield cornerstone, leave for nothing, only to sign Christian Nørgaard, a solid but limited replacement? Now they're reportedly finalising a deal for Martin Zubimendi, a midfielder who does fit the profile, but begs the question, why wasn't this the plan last summer? And what's the logic behind signing Kepa Arrizabalaga to compete with Raya? That's not a depth move, that's indecision. When you zoom out, a pattern starts to form. Arsenal began this rebuild with precision. Every signing had a purpose. But now, the squad feels bloated in some areas, thin in others. They've gone from deliberate to reactive, from bold to uncertain. On the pitch, that manifests as inconsistency. One week, they dominate possession and suffocate teams with their press. The next, they look passive, overly cautious, devoid of risk. Arteta's blueprint seems to be evolving, but the materials he's working with don't always match the design. And for fans who believed this was the season, the culmination of the project, the cracks are hard to ignore. Because Arsenal are still good, but they no longer feel inevitable. And in a league where City and Liverpool are always lurking, good might not be enough. Not when the identity that made you dangerous in the first place is starting to disappear. Chapter 2. Arteta's Paradox. Progress or plateau? Mikel Arteta's project was once football's favourite experiment. A young manager learning on the job, sculpting a team in his image with positional play, vertical movement and structure that echoed Guardiola's influence, but with its own edge. Arsenal played like a machine, but one that still had heart. And then, something changed. The more experienced Arteta became, the more rigid things got. Arsenal no longer played through instinct. They played against it. Every action began to feel choreographed. Every movement calculated. And when the system failed to unlock defenses, there was no chaos to fall back on. No improvisation, just sterile domination. The numbers still looked good. Possession, XG, even points. But the feeling, that unshakable feeling of momentum, started to fade. Some blame the players, others blame the pressure. But let's be honest, the pressure is real. Arteta is no longer the bold young architect with time on his side. He's now a manager with one of the league's most expensive squads, backed by an ownership group that expects silverware, not just vibes. And after 2 seasons of almosts, even small mistakes feel heavier. Look at the reactions from fans this season. Not just frustration, confusion. Why are we playing safe at 1-1 against Brentford? Why is Saka isolated for 70 minutes against Newcastle? Why do we have midfielders who can't switch play under pressure? The tactical identity that once made Arteta special, fluid but disciplined, daring but controlled, now feels cautious. At times, even scared. And the pressure doesn't just come from above, it comes from behind. Managers like Arne Slot and Enzo Maresca are already being hailed as the next tactical innovators in the league. They're bold, they're modern, they're building something, just like Arteta did. But the football world moves fast. 1 minute you're a revolutionary, the next you're the system others have learned how to break. Arsenal fans believed this season would be a culmination, but instead of fireworks, it's been a slow flicker. A team caught between what it was and what it maybe still could be. And for Arteta, that's the paradox. He's brought Arsenal close, he's built the foundation, but close doesn't win titles, and foundations mean nothing if you don't keep building. So now the question becomes, is this still a project with a future, or a project that already peaked? Chapter 3. When Identity Becomes a Cage. At first, it felt like a revelation. Mikel Arteta's Arsenal were everything fans had been begging for. Structured, technical, modern. A team with a clear identity. Gone were the chaotic, directionless performances of the post-Wenger, post-Emery years. Instead, Arsenal played like a machine. Precise positioning, calculated build-up, fullbacks drifting inside, and midfielders dictating tempo with surgical control. And it worked, for a while. But now, that identity, once their greatest strength, is starting to feel like a trap. The problem with having a system this defined, this carefully built, is that eventually, everyone figures it out. In the early days, Zinchenko tucking inside from fullback was a tactical masterstroke. Nørgaard ghosting into central zones made him unplayable. Declan Rice anchored the midfield like a general in armour. But now, opposition teams plan for this. They know where the passes are going. They know which zones to overload. They've mapped the Arsenal blueprint, and they're tearing pages out of it. Managers have learned to bait Zinchenko into uncomfortable positions, to pressure Nørgaard before he can turn, and to isolate Saka with double marking on the flank. Arsenal's famous control often turns into slow, predictable possession, and when that breaks down, there's very little chaos or direct threat left. The worst part? There's no obvious plan B. Arteta spent years crafting this ideology, preaching positional discipline, strict roles, and technical superiority. And because of that, Arsenal now seem almost afraid to break the mold. Even players like Kai Havertz, who once played with reckless creativity at Bayer Leverkusen, now look confined. Gabriel Jesus, a natural improviser, often finds himself too deep, too wide, too tangled in build-up duties to do what he was signed to do, score goals. And then come the signings. Sterling, who was loaned in for depth, seemed like a strange fit from day one. Kepa, brought in to compete with Raya, is not a bad goalkeeper. But is he the kind who wins you tight title races? Nørgaard, a gritty pressing midfielder, doesn't fit the technical mould of Arteta's original midfield triangle. These aren't bad players, but they feel like duct tape over structural cracks. And now Arsenal are rumoured to bring in Martin Zubimendi, a technical but rigid midfielder. Another piece for a system that may already be breaking. That's the paradox of this Arsenal project. It's become so defined that it can't evolve. And in a Premier League where Pep Guardiola reinvents his team every season, where Klopp's successor is building a new monster at Liverpool, and where even Chelsea, for all their chaos, are willing to experiment, Arsenal are standing still. The same rotations, the same triggers, the same vulnerabilities. You can see the exhaustion in the fans, the doubt in the players. Arteta once brought clarity, now he might be bringing repetition. And if this system can no longer surprise or adapt, then what happens in the biggest games? What happens when it matters most? Because identity is important. But if it becomes a cage, you're not building a dynasty, you're just walking in circles. And that frustration of being close but not enough creates a deeper issue we'll look at next. Not tactics, not transfers, but mentality. Chapter 4. Mentality monsters? Not yet. You can build a beautiful system. You can sign all the right profiles. You can even dominate games with 70% possession. But what happens when it's 1-1 at Anfield in the 89th minute? What happens when you're 2 points behind City in April and you have to win? That's when you learn what a team is really made of. And Arsenal, for all their progress, keep failing this test. It's not just about talent. Arsenal have that. Odegaard, Saka, Saliba, Rice. These are elite players. It's not even about depth anymore. The club has invested heavily in recent windows. It's about mentality, the ability to show up no matter what, when the pressure is suffocating. And right now, Arsenal are showing cracks where others show steel. Look back at the past 2 seasons. In 20 and 23, Arsenal led the league for 248 days, more than any runner-up in Premier League history. They collapsed in the final weeks. In 2024, the same pattern emerged. Strong start, promising build-up, faltering finish. They don't just lose games, they lose their nerve. Against Brighton at home, they froze. Against Spurs away, they panicked. Against City, they barely showed up. And worst of all, when they needed a final push in May, when the title was in reach, they ran out of belief. You could see it in the body language, the hesitation in final third, the drop in intensity after conceding. This is not a team of killers yet. They're intelligent, organized, and talented. But when things go wrong, they don't get angry. They get quiet. They don't grab the game by the throat. They wait for instructions. It's a symptom of overcoaching, but also of a culture still in transition. Contrast that with the great teams of the era. City under Guardiola are relentless. They don't care about pressure. They turn it into fuel. Even Liverpool, with a thinner squad, often won games on sheer emotion, belief, and fury. Arsenal still seem like a team trying to prove they belong. The imposter syndrome lingers. The players know they're good, but maybe not that good. And in the Premier League, that doubt will kill you. Even their captain, Martin Odegaard, isn't a vocal warrior. He's a technician, a conductor. But who's the one screaming, lifting heads, throwing tackles when it all starts to slip? Who's the leader that drags them through 10 miserable minutes of chaos and pressure? Some hoped Declan Rice would be that figure, but leadership takes time to grow. Right now, there's still a vacuum, a team full of nice guys without a single villain. And that's the cruel truth. To win in this league, you don't just need tactics, you need scars, you need bite. You need to walk into the Etihad and not just play, but believe you'll win. Arsenal have come far, but champions are built in the fire. And right now, they still look afraid of getting burned. It's easy to fall in love with the idea of Arsenal. The young squad, the beautiful football, the project with heart. But football doesn't reward potential. It rewards pain, grit, ruthlessness. Right now, Arsenal look like a team on the brink of greatness or of another collapse. The pieces are there, but the question remains, will they finally grow into champions, or will they keep reminding us that sometimes the project never becomes reality?